Hi everyone, welcome to Nithrania Game Club. My name is Branislav Berec and you are watching Game in a Nutshell, a series of videos explaining how to play various board games. Today we'll take a look at the Endeavor Age of Sail. This is a Kickstarter version that came with the Exploits expansion. So in the first part we'll take a look at the base game, and in the second part we'll take a look at the expansion. First, choose which side of the game board you wish to use. One side is suitable for a 2 or 3 player game or a high conflict 4 player game, and the other side is suitable for a low conflict 4 player game or 5 player game. Then randomly distribute all 95 trade tokens face up on every circular space on the game board, like shipping tracks, cities, fleets, and circular links. Separate the asset cards by region and rearrange them by their value so that the lowest number is on top. Place the corresponding governor card next to each region on the map. You can actually slip it under the board, but make sure that the symbols are visible. Now prepare the building tray. Each building has a symbol in the top right corner which indicates its level, which could be level 1 up to level 5. Place all the level 1 buildings in the leftmost column of the tray and separate the buildings by their type. Then place all the level 2 buildings into the next column, again separated by their type. Finally, there are 7 level 5 buildings in the game. Shuffle them and randomly place 4 of them face down in the bottom right pocket of the tray. Then place the remaining 3 cards face up in the level 5 pockets, and these 3 face-up buildings are the only level 5 buildings available in the game. Each player gets a player board and a small tray with cubes and discs of the chosen color. Place the 4 cubes on 4 attribute tracks to the leftmost space, marked with the number 0. Randomly choose the start player and give him the crown token. Starting with this first player and then going clockwise, each player chooses which side of the start building tile they wish to use for the game. Then place this building to the leftmost space on the player board and place 1 disc from the supply onto the building's activation circle. And that's the whole setup, and now you're ready to start the game. The game is played over 7 rounds, and each round consists of 5 phases. In each phase, the start player goes first and is followed by other players in a clockwise order. However, you may find it a lot easier to combine the first 3 phases together. So the starting player will execute the construction phase, growth phase and salary phase in one go, and then the next player will do the same, and so on and so forth. In the construction phase, you may build a building, which means you can take a building from the supply tray and add it to the leftmost space on the player board. There is no need to pay anything for the building, so you're basically building for free, but you have to make sure that the level of the building is equal to or lower than your current position on the industry attribute track. If the building you construct has any symbols in the bottom left corner, you can immediately use these symbols and move the corresponding marker on the attribute track. And by the way, you can build the same building multiple times. During the growth phase, you gain population discs from your supply and add them to your harbor. The number of discs you gain is indicated by your position on the culture track. In the salary phase, you pay the workers for the work they did, so you move the population discs from the activation circles on the buildings back to the harbor. The number of discs you can move back to the harbor is indicated by your position on the wealth track. If you cannot pay all of them, it is your decision which ones to move. In the action phase, players can take actions starting with the first player and then followed by other players in the clockwise order. Each turn you can take 1 action or pass. Once you pass, you may take no further actions this round. There are 2 ways how to take action. You can either activate a building by moving a disc from your harbor to an empty activation circle on a building. By placing the disc on the building, you simply trigger the action, and you may need additional discs from your harbor to carry out the action. Now you understand why it is so important to free up the buildings and discs during the celery phase. You can only take an action if the building is empty. The second way how to take an action is to spend an action token. If you have the blue action token in your harbor, you can discard it from the game and carry out an action depicted on the token. When you activate a building which allows you to take one action plus another one action, you can take one, the other, or both actions. If you activate a building which has multiple actions separated by the slash sign, you can only take one of those actions. When you take a ship action, you can move one of the discs from the harbor either to a shipping track or to a fleet space or to an open sea. At the beginning of the game, all regions, except for Europe, are considered to be closed regions, and you can only ship to a shipping track. The shipping track starts with this arrow. When you ship to a shipping track, take one of the discs from your harbor and place it on the first available space on the shipping track. By available space, I mean the space that has no player disc on it. By placing your disc on the space, you will also claim the trade token from that space. When you claim a blue action token, simply put it into your harbor. When you claim the brown trade token, place it to the circular space next to the corresponding attribute track and move the marker one space to the right. When you place a disc onto the very last space of the shipping track, two things will happen. First of all, the region becomes open, and all the players can now ship to the fleet spaces and to an open sea in this region. And the second thing is that the region's governor card is immediately awarded to the player who has the most discs on the region's shipping track. If there is a tie, the card goes to one of those tied players who was the last one to place a disc on this shipping track. When you gain the governor card, flip it to its vertical orientation and place it in one of the card slots or the free governor card slot on the player mat. Then immediately adjust your attribute tracks by moving the markers to the right by the corresponding number of symbols. As the region of Europe doesn't have a shipping track, it is considered to be open from the very beginning of the game. When you ship to a fleet space, you move the disc from your harbor to an unoccupied fleet space either in Europe or in any open region, gaining the trade token from there. When you ship to an open sea, again move a disc from your harbor to the open sea circle of any open region. Open sea circle can contain any number of discs belonging to any number of players. Shipping to an open sea is useful when you need to gain a presence in a region and you have no other option available. The occupy action is very similar to the shipping action. You move a disc from your harbor, but this time you move it to an unoccupied city. You can do it in any open region or in Europe, but you have to have the presence in that region. That means you have to have at least one disc of your color in that region already. This doesn't apply to Europe, because all players are always considered to have a presence in Europe. Many cities and fleets are connected to each other by these lines that are called links. If you have your discs at both ends of a link, you control that link. If you are the first player to control the link with the trade token, you immediately claim that token. In addition, links are worth victory points at the end of the game. When you attack, you remove an opponent's disc from a city or a fleet back to their supply tray. Then move one of your discs from the harbor to this vacated space, and then move another disc from your harbor back to your supply tray. This is your casualty of the attack. Similar to occupy action, you can only do this in an open region or in Europe, and you have to have a presence in that region. Remember, you always have a presence in Europe. As a result of an attack, you might be the first to control a link with the trade token on it, and in that case you claim that token. When you perform the payment action, you simply move one of your discs from a building of your choice in your player board back to your harbor. When you perform the draw action, you take the top asset card from the region and place it to one of the slots on your player board or beside if there is no room on the player board. You can do it in any region, open or closed, but you have to have a presence in that region. In addition, you can only draw this top card if your presence in the region equals or exceeds the card's draw value. When you add the card to your player board, immediately increase your position on the corresponding attribute tracks by the number of symbols displayed on the card. This plus disc symbol means that you immediately gain one disc from your supply to your harbor. In Europe, in addition to the regular asset deck, there is also this slavery deck. This deck works in the exact same way as any other deck in the game until the moment someone claims the value 5 card from the regular Europe deck. This value 5 card is called Abolition of Slavery, and the first time any player gains this card, all players must immediately set aside all their slavery cards they hold. Do not discard them, just set them aside. Reduce your attribute scores to reflect the lost symbols and flip these cards over face down. These cards do not count toward your card limit, and you will lose 1 glory at the end of the game for each of these cards. If there are any slavery cards still remaining on the board, just remove them from the game. At the end of every round, your position on the influence track determines how many cards you can keep. For example, this simply means you can keep any 2 cards plus 1 slavery card. This slot is called Free Governor slot, and it can hold only 1 governor card, and this card doesn't count towards your card limit. If you have more cards than you can keep, you can freely rearrange your cards in your player board and then discard those that exceed your limit. If you discard a governor card, it is removed from the game. If you discard a slavery card, it's not discarded, you just set it aside, flip it face down as a reminder that you will lose 1 point for discard at the end of the game. If you discard any asset card, it goes into a face-up discard pile near the Europe region. If any player performs a draw action in the Europe region, that player may take any card from this discard pile, assuming that player has sufficient presence in Europe. When you take the card from this discard pile, again apply all the effects on this card. At the end of the round, pass the first player token to the player to the left, and the new round can begin. However, if this is the end of the 7th round, it's the end of the game and proceed to final scoring. By the way, you will know it's the end of the 7th round if all players' seasides are completely full of buildings. First, calculate the score on the attribute tracks. Each track has spaces with symbols and without symbols. Markers on spaces with symbols stay where they are. Markers on spaces without symbols slide down until they reach the first space that has a symbol. The final position of each cube indicates the score for each track. Then count up all the glory symbols on all the cities and links you control. Also count up any visible glory symbols on buildings, on asset cards, and even if you have the free governor slot. If you have an extra population in your harbor, gain 1 glory point for every 3 discs. And finally, lose 1 glory point for each slavery card that you have set aside. The player with the highest total score wins the game. In addition to the standard setup, randomly choose 3 exploit tiles and place them somewhere near the game board. You can put the remaining ones back into the box. Then check all the selected exploit tiles if there is any additional setup required. Each exploit displays 2 region crests. For each of these 6 crests, place one key token near the matching region. And finally, make sure that all the players have the player shields of their color in the supply trays. All the exploits are closed and unavailable at the beginning of the game. When regions become open during the play, if there are any keys associated with this region, place them on corresponding spaces on the exploit tiles. When both crests on the exploit tile have keys on them, that exploit is now activated and available for players. If you have a presence in both regions displayed on this exploit card, place one of your shields from your supply onto this exploit. This indicates that you are entitled to use the abilities of this exploit. If you lose a presence in any of these two regions, you immediately take your shield back to your supply tray and you lose access to the abilities of this exploit tile. Similarly, if you regain presence in both of those regions later on again, put your shield back onto this exploit card and all those abilities are again available to you. Each exploit tile shows which action types can be activated on this tile. When you take an action either from a building or from a blue action token, you may use the ability on the exploit tile instead of a standard action. We will not cover those special actions here, they are all explained on each exploit tile. When you have your shield on the exploit tile at the end of the game, you can also gain victory points from this exploit. So that's how you play Endeavor Age of Sail. If you have any questions or observations, please put them into the comments below. I'll be very happy to answer those questions. And until next time, my name is Branislav Berec and you've been watching Game in a Nutshell.